I'm Chris Newsome, I'm Director of Asset Management at Anglian Water. I'm going to start with a slide that you probably won't see replicated around this arena. Some big, hairy, audacious goals. 60% capital carbon reduction by 2020. 7% in real terms capital OPEX reduction. Why? Okay, so if you are in the east of England, and 23% of your asset base lies below sea level, and you've got a forecast of 600 mil sea rise over the next 60 years, and you're the fastest growing area in the country with new properties being built, and you're observing drier climate with flashier storms, if there was going to be a leader in this kind of issue, it's going to be Anglian Water. So by way of reason, those are my self-imposed targets. Now what I want to do is tell you the story about why I got to that point, because these are self-imposed. And if anybody can't keep up with that story, the story is on the Anglian Water stand over there. So you can see our carbon journey over there. And then towards the end of the presentation, I'll link with the work in the Green Construction Board and where we're going with that. So I go back in time now to around 2008, and we had a regulator who was saying, I, the regulator, need to be aware that I'm not asking you through efficiency, capital efficiency, to put non-sustainable assets in place. He was worried that he was going to drive assets that would become stranded. And so we were asked to create a carbon baseline for everything that we were intending to build between 2010 and 2015. And we were asked to price that at £26 per tonne of CO2. And you know what? We did that, and it made bugger all difference. Okay? So why the hell am I still talking about it? Because at £80 a tonne, it might make a difference. It might make a big difference. So if you know that that's coming in an area where you are subject to the greatest pressures of climate change, you better be prepared and you better show leadership. So it made no difference, but it made us think. Because to get to that point, there was two ways. You could either go, I'm doing a top-down analysis of my carbon, which some companies did, or you can say, this probably matters, so we're going to build carbon models, and we're going to understand where our carbon is. At that point, the regulator backed off completely and has shown no interest in what's happened since. So the story is now from 2008, how we've taken that forward. So in our carbon modelling and in our proving of concept, we discovered some things, like actually in the mains that we lay, something like 12% of the carbon is in the pipe. The rest is in the construction technique, assuming, as we were at that time, that we were laying the majority through open cut. And likewise, on the above ground stuff, you discover that actually 80% of your carbon is in the concrete and the steel. So it becomes bleedingly obvious to me. You stop digging holes and you start using no-dig, and you start thinking about how I use less material, less natural resource, whether that's by building less, building differently, or if I have to build the same, building it smarter with different materials or thinner sections. The net result is the same. You use less material. So you are saving the planet. At the moment, we're consuming the equivalent of 3 planets as a nation. So we need to stop using our natural resources in the way we are. So it ticks that box. And if you do use less material, the chances are that your costs will reduce. Now at that point, that was all belief, and I'll say the story is one of 50% belief and 50% belligerence to get from where we were there to where we are today. Or you could say, was it leadership, and was it alignment of our supply chain into a value chain, and was it innovation? You make your decision in terms of our carbon story. So those are the reasons why in 2008 we set a big, hairy, audacious goal, and we said by 2015 we'll have taken half the carbon out of the assets that we build. And that was the demand that we set on our supply chain. And in reality, we didn't set KPIs and we didn't set incentives to do that. We simply said, actually, this is the right thing to do, and if you want to be with us for the longer term, we better find a way of doing this. So it was that kind of incentive. This is what we're doing. If you want to be with us for longer term, then we better find a way of doing it. And the process started out as exactly what I said. Do I have to build? Can I build less? Can I build smarter? Etc. And that was the challenge that we had to get into the minds of our suppliers, our engineers, and our operators and the wider stakeholders. We had our carbon models to actually help us within that and to hint at where the carbon was. And you've had Craig Jones speaking today, and I am indebted to the work that Bath did, because one of our starting points in our ability to do that came from the early work that Bath University did. And we worked hard within our expectations with our supply chain. So on the 1st of April 2010, it went to, you will take 15% out of your costs, you will reduce your OPEX, you will reduce your capital carbon by 50%, and you will take your operating carbon down. Now, anybody got a view how long it took? And I run my investment group and decision making weekly. Anybody got how many weeks it would take before the first team came back with an answer that met all those criteria, rather than saying, I've done that, but I can't do that, etc. Just make a punt. 6 weeks, you would. Anybody else? Okay. The answer was about 26 weeks. And there is in advertising an adage that says you've got to tell somebody 20 times before they really get it. But the power was when that team came back, they'd stopped themselves from coming back with an answer that had taken their project from 24 million down to 17 million and taken their OPEX down and taken their carbon down, but not enough, to an answer that had seen the CapEx fall by a further 3 million to 14 million, seen the OPEX being a real reduction on the site, not just on the assets that they were creating, and the capital carbon had fallen by 60%. And at that point, you knew that there was value in the belief, and the governance was the thing that got us there, holding true to the tiller week after week. We're not moving on this message. We need to find a way of achieving this. So the sort of things that came out of that 5-year period, when we do that, is something as simple as a sampling pillar, built off-site, pre-plumbed, ready to deliver to site, solar panel on the roof, tick, tick, tick. Where's the rest of the carbon in that then? It's normally in the foundation. We did away with the foundation. It was a steel plate that went in on some crushed stone. And when you do that, your costs fall down, your OPEX falls out, and your capital carbon goes through the floor. Great example. This is what we used to do. So anybody who knows my business, we treat a lot of stuff that you flush down the toilet and wash down the sink. And we traditionally do that with biology, and it traditionally looks like a rotating arm filter. So when we have been through this evolution of how do you do that in a new environment of build less and build smarter, it looks something like the thing on the right-hand side. Again, no concrete in the foundation. A steel structure with slotted, recycled plastic of a modular nature. And the media inside is a recycled plastic that the biology grows on. And when you do that, guess what happens to your costs? And guess how easy that is to build and how much time, less time it takes in the building. Here's some other examples, and I won't labour them, but some of you will be aware back in 2012 there's a bit of a drought looming on the country, and we, like other water companies, had to do some pretty major pieces of work in anticipation. The top one is a 20 megalitres per day pumping station going in. The difference is that came on the back of a wagon. It was in a sensitive area from planning. Planning insisted on brick-built building to fit in with the vernacular. That came already lined externally with brick, Even the fire exit illuminated when we went to plug and play, and we had water flowing in a fraction of the time. Here's an example of what happens when you ask the supply chain to innovate. The bottom right, big pipes. You can see a guy stood in that, so it gives you an idea. It's about 2.5 meter diameter, and it's laid on its site for storage. It could have been a concrete tank and would have been a reinforced concrete tank only a few years earlier. It's now recycled plastic or MDPE, spirally wound. But importantly, when you realize that the carbon is in the construction, you dig a semicircular hole rather than a rectangular hole that then you have to backfill with half a hillside of fresh granular material. So you get innovation going within the supply chain. And by the way, the concrete boys didn't like that. Didn't like that one bit, because their business was disappearing because we were using a fraction of the concrete that we previously used. So I'll come back to where we are now on concrete on another slide. Here we are, AMP6. We're the first water company to have started using, and it is testing it, chem-free concrete. No cement, no carbon in the concrete. Couldn't have envisaged that when we started out the journey in 2008. Just knew that 80% of my carbon was in the concrete and the steel. But in 7 years, we've gone from using nothing but concrete and steel to actually using different materials, and then back to concrete, but with the cement taken out of it. So that's the kind of territory that you get to. And just so that I haven't forgotten about cost, because my belief at the outset was that it was the right thing to reduce carbon, but because I'd be using less materials, I would be reducing cost. I don't think anybody else can do this, but this is a plot of all our schemes delivered in the period 2010 to 2015. And if you want to be in a quadrant that is reducing cost and reducing carbon, it's this one. So you can see that the majority, and if you counted the dots, it's about 80%, are actually up in that right-hand quadrant. And if you then aggregate that over the period, actually we reduce carbon by 45% on average over that period. In the final year, we reduce carbon by 54%. So the belief and the ignorance, or the leadership and the alignment and the innovation, actually paid off, and it paid off handsomely, not only in protecting the climate, but in terms of reducing the cost. And you can scale that to give an indication. You know, if carbon is 45.50, then cost is 20.25. You can get there in terms of its percentage reduction. So where did that take me? Well, obviously it created quite a bit of interest across our supply chain. Our supply chain largely blue chip construction and consultancies within our industry. And early in 2010, I got involved in the infrastructure cost review. You know, so how can we drive cost out of the construction that we do in the UK? And that really concluded that it was about leadership, and it was about alignment of value chains, and it was about innovation. So hardly surprisingly, when I was asked to get involved in the carbon review for infrastructure through the Green Construction Board, I saw some really big parallels between taking carbon out and meeting the requirements of the infrastructure cost review. To the extent that although BIS was the supporter and promoter of carbon reduction because of what it will generate in terms of competitive advantage for our businesses, actually that was co-published by HM Treasury, because the infrastructure cost review was published by HM Treasury. And that was published in November, launched in November 2013. And we have 53 companies, blue chip companies, from asset owners and client organizations right the way through the delivery routes of consultancies and contractors to product suppliers, signed up to that infrastructure carbon review. I'd like to think that everybody in this hall would sign up, because there's no reason why they wouldn't. But one of the challenges are, when you do something like that, a document like that is written at a very high level. So the group went on, having launched it, to say, how can we now help in guiding people to make best use of that in the way that we've learned over the last 7 years. So this was the launch back in the 25th of November 2013. Got loads of signatories on it, and these are the signatories involved. But the thing that I'd ask you to look at is the thing over the right-hand side. That's the value chain that I talk about. And it's perfectly possible that every single one of those players can, in their own right, reduce carbon. If we left it simply to the designer, to the contractor's saying, well, I'm told what to build. All I can do is make sure I do it greener, so I'll use green fuel in my tanks. I'll make sure my vehicles are LPG or electric or whatever. I will do my best. If you leave it to the designer and the client hasn't said, I want this, then the designer will do their best within the remits of standard product and specifications that the client works with. If you get back to the client and the client gets on board and says, do you know what? I want to be part of this solution, not just part of the problem, then we get a very different scenario because the client is prepared to move as well and to not insist on doing things in the way that they previously did. Simply, we have a role in reducing carbon. How do we do this? And it creates a very different scenario. So, past 2080 is emergent. Past 2080 is now out to consultation and will be launched on the 4th of May at BIS's offices. And the point of past 2080 is it converts the why into the what. What is it that we have to do if we want to achieve that? Now, unfortunately, anybody who's read a British standard, and this isn't derogatory, it's written in a certain way and it's written in a certain technical way. So, fine, we've got a British publicly available standard specification to actually do this. But what's the guidance document? So it's great that we will have past 2080, but it is the guidance document that will give the real advice of how you go on a carbon journey, how you set your targets, how you model your carbon, how you do the leadership and the governance piece in order to be able to get the kind of results that have been achieved. It's been written such that all those things feature: the governance, the target setting, alignment of that value chain, the quantification of the carbon emissions, and the feedback loop into what that means in terms of what's possible and a ratcheting on the target. And collectively, reducing the carbon will reduce the cost. So we are at that point where it's out to consultation. The important thing in conclusion is that it's been written in a way that any one member of that value chain can seek compliance against 2080. I want this to be inclusive, not exclusive. So going back to what I said earlier, do you know what? If there's a contractor out there that really wants to green his fleet, he can be compliant under 2080. If there's a designer out there that really wants to push the boundaries of carbon reduction, he can do that and get compliance under 2080. If there's product suppliers out there, they can change and go for the compliance 2080. But collectively, my view is that if you've got a client, a designer, a contractor, and a supply chain all compliant to 2080, that's when the magic happens, that's when the real difference happens, and that's when you get into the 50, 60, 70% reductions that I talked about earlier. So hopefully I've given you a flavour of our journey. It's on the board over there if anybody wants to follow through on that, and I'm happy to open myself up to questions, Anthony.
Thanks so much, Chris. Round of applause, Chris Newsome. Chris, I think for me, I have been involved in the Green Construction Board, and I do know about this journey you've been on. I suppose when you say there are 53 companies, organisations involved and signed up, it strikes me as that's never enough. It's never enough. And I suppose, can you just say, I mean, we're here on ACCO's supported Fringe. ACCO, it makes a lot of stuff which is buried in the ground. It's got a big role to play. What advice, why should... I mean, make the case to ACCO here. Why should they sign? They're not signed up.
No, they're not.
The shame of it. Where's Richard?
Where's Richard?
But make the case to them, because they probably don't know what the case is. What is the case? What is your elevator pitch to ACCO to get involved?
I think Richard does know the case, and I think the document's on his desk. And I think he's quite proud of that product over there because it's got a lot of recycled materials in it. So it ticks all the boxes. But wouldn't it be nice if everybody else knew it ticked all those boxes?
So what is the ones, if you got 2 minutes with someone to convince their leader that they need to get involved, what is the elevator pitch?
Reducing carbon, reduce costs, and play your part in that, and make sure you're aware of how your product or your service or your activity actually contributes to reducing costs. It's your competitive advantage.
Because it is all about competitive advantage.
It is all about competitive advantage.
Basically, the carbon is a distraction in many ways, but the carbon is the proxy for cost.
Absolutely. It's a proxy for resource, which is
now,
cost.
how did you get, therefore, across the difficulty in your own supply chain at Anglian about the fact that you are requiring them to use less material, to do less for you, and therefore, I imagine, to get paid less?
No, not at all. Belligerence is everything. So if you believe in something strong enough and you're resolute, then you will get there. And as I said, the supply chain that we have at Anglian, we've set up on a long-term basis. But also we've set the commercials up such that there is gain share around how we would have done it and the delta between how we're now doing it and how we would have done it. So, if we reduce carbon and it does reduce cost, then it increases the gain share that my shareholders get, but also the supply chain can get. And that's the trick of getting the alignment.
I want to put Manon on the spot here because Manon represents the MPA, the Major Projects Association, which is an organisation which is it is a whole load of leaders in the industry. And I suppose my first question to Manon, how much is the infrastructure carbon review cross the MPA's borders?
Not massively, I don't think. I suspect that that's because most of those 54 organisations that already signed up to it
Correct.
are members of MPA. So it probably doesn't need to be on the MPA agenda because it's already been discussed at Infrastructure Client Group and places like that. But I would just say, Chris, if you want to share those materials and have those all available on our website, I'm very happy to make space for it.
Happy to. The case studies are out there on the Green Construction Board website. And anything that isn't on there, you're more than welcome to from the Anglian Water portfolio.
Fantastic. We'll play our part.
Yeah. But the importance here is the longevity. So I'd hazard a guess that in a single major project where there isn't longevity, you're back to that same issue of skills and upskilling, that long-term investment in innovation, etc. The supply chain I'm talking about after the first 5 years, we've signed up for 5 + 5 + 5. And it's amazing when you have economies of scale and you have a 15-year intent, how much interest there is in investing in innovation at the front end in order to be able to allow the gain share to flow. It just speaks for itself.
I mean, is there an advantage for the business like Anglian because you have got long-term investment programs? You can see a long way ahead and where you're going. Is that an advantage for you?
It's definitely an advantage in this sense, and it's definitely an advantage in terms of setting out a program of works that will not only deliver benefit to customers and stretching the effectiveness of what we deliver, but also make sure that we do deliver them more efficiently. And to government, we've talked long and hard about strategy, and now of course we've got the National Infrastructure Group looking at that longer term strategy. So hopefully other things will emerge from that route as well.
And you mentioned the PAS and the Green Construction Board. The Green Construction Board is a government industry
Partnership.
But of course, that were all kicked off in the days of the coalition. The government now has got a different agenda. It's very much that the private sector, it can enable the private sector, but it's all about the private sector to deliver what it needs to deliver to drive its businesses. Are you sensing a change? Are you sensing less support or more support or different support from the government on this kind of initiative?
I mean, obviously we've been through a change in the last 12 months. And yes, I'm sensing different support. So the Green Construction Board is the sustainability arm of the Construction Leadership Council, so it's one of the 4 streams. So if anything, the focus has been widened to a wider piece of sustainability, not just carbon. But why wouldn't anybody, if you put the case as simply as possible, support something that doesn't just green what we do or make more sustainable what we do, it actually reduce the cost base with how we do it? You would. And so I don't see it at odds with a government that actually wants to become more efficient. I see it as part and parcel of the toolkit.
Okay, and then go back finally to Anglian again. I mean, how do you see Anglian, or how can you describe Anglian's, I suppose, business, the way that you are as an organisation? Now, presumably you are significantly different because you are really majoring on innovation, and does that make you as an organisation having to, do you operate differently? Are you more open-minded? Are you more challenging? I mean, what difference has it made to your organisation?
It makes a huge difference. I mean, first and foremost, we're there to deliver service, and the expectations around service are never-ending in terms of improvements that are required, whether that's around customer service or whether it's around reducing in flooding or whatever. Those issues never go away, they just get ratcheted time and time again. So what we need is a supply chain that is with us on that journey, learning as we go, not on each individual contract and having to relearn, but simply raising the bar because we have collectively learned something that we didn't know, and guess what? We'll know even more when we've done the next job, and we'll just keep on that route. And I think that's the beauty of what we've got, and that comes out of longevity, and it comes out of knowing your supply chain, and it comes out of having integrity in how you engage with the supply chain.
And what the PAS does is enables that journey that you've been on, the lessons that you've been on, and you've taken the Green Construction Board on to be written down and to provide that why to how for everybody else to lead and learn from.
The PAS was originally written as where instructed by the client, contractors, consultants will do. Those words have completely disappeared, and I said earlier, the trick for me is it's inclusive, and every piece of the value chain can gain compliance against PAS 2080. The magic happens when we align it all and we act as one.
Obviously, at the start of the presentation, you outlined you had quite a bullish approach to committing to reducing carbon. Is this something, do you think it's been replicated by the wider water industry in terms of other water companies taking that approach on board and contributing to a overall national reduction in carbon in this sector? Or are you really leading the way?
I think you'll find that there are now some water companies out there that are emulating. So, they would have set their strategy out for 2010 through to 2015. They would have observed what we would have done, and we got 5 years ahead in this respect. If you look at the words that I used in 2010 and said 50% reduction by 2015, there's another water company out there that's actually got exactly that same phrase. They just replaced 2010 by 2015 and 2015 by 2020. And I'm delighted if they do achieve that, and I will help them in that.
But there's no reason why they shouldn't be, because they all face the same challenges.
There's absolutely no reason why they shouldn't.
And you have got Thames is on there with the Tideway project. You've got organisations such as HS2.
We've got HS2. We've got National Rail. We've got Environment Agency,
National
and
Grid.
Highways England, and National Grid, and Anglian Water,
and UK Power Networks.
Yeah.
So there are pretty much the entire collection of major asset owners.
Yeah.
But there's more work to do down the whole supply chain.
The trick for me is, as you've just hinted, it's nailing your colours to the mast. Once you've said, we are going to take 50% out and we're going to be known for that, and you can measure us on whether we achieve that, there is no way back. And what I want to see is more companies being bold enough to do that. What they tend to do, if I'm honest, is they tend to measure what can be achieved and then publish a target that's achievable. And that's not what we did, and that's not what the carbon journey is about, in my mind.
Chris, leadership and I suppose the supply chain alignment and it's embracing innovation. Green Construction Board, the Infrastructure Carbon Review, you haven't heard about it before, go and find out a bit more from Chris, who's here, from the Anglian Water Stand. There's a whole load of information out there. Do keep your eye on the PAS consultation, which is out on the BIS website.
It's out now, yes, and it will be launched in the Victoria Street offices of BIS on the 4th of May.
4th of May, that's right, there's a big conference there, so if you do want to get hold of, get some information, come along to that and make sure you're aware of it. Go to the BIS website, the Green Construction Board website, and there's lots of information. Chris Newsome, thanks for updating us. Round of applause for Chris. Thank you very much.
Anthony. Thank you.
Thanks, Chris.